This is the Joe watches a movie and then gives it a rating show. I enjoyed it, but it didn't leave me completely satisfied like other westerns from this era. High Noon, a western from 1952 starring Gary the Coop Cooper as Will Kane, a marshal for the small town of Hadleyville who is retiring and marrying Amy Fowler, who is played by Grace Kelly. It's funny that these two characters are getting married because at the time Gary Cooper was like 98 years old and Grace Kelly was barely out of diapers, but it was the Old West and everyone who was in attendance is like, "Hooray! We just saw a child marry a grandfather! Better throw that rice!" Also, Kane and his new child bride are moving to another town so they can open their own store. And it's another detail of this movie that I find really funny, that they have to move away from Hadleyville in order to do this. Like, Kane marshaled this town, protected these people with his life for the past, 100 years, and they can't give him one of the buildings? Or, build a new one? It's not like construction back then was that complicated. 4 walls, a roof, and a door. And maybe a few windows if you really wanted to get fancy, but that's all it took. It's not like they had to deal with electrical wiring, and as far as I know, they didn't have to have any indoor plumbing. They just put a bucket in the corner of the room, and there you go. That's what made the West so wild. I mean, seriously, are these town people assholes? Now that I'm thinking about it, maybe that's why he wants to leave. Well, anyway, he can't leave because his old foe is returning to Hadleyville, who Kane sent away to get hung to die, Frank Miller, played by Ian McDonald, and he's coming on the next train, which is arriving in 90 minutes with his gang to exact his revenge on Kane. The marshal decides to stay to fight Miller and his gang and tries to round up a posse of the townspeople, but instead he just finds a bunch of pussies because nobody will help him. Nobody! They are a bunch of assholes. Well, except for one overeager teenage boy who's probably so full of pent-up sexual anger and frustration because the only other kid his age in town married a geriatric. But he tries to help Kane, and Kane's like, "You probably can't even shoot your piss straight. Fuck off, boy." There actually isn't any action in this movie until the last 15 minutes, which was a big risk back then. Hell, it'd be a big risk in a movie today, especially with a Western. I mean, people craved violence back then and went to the movies to see cowboys shoot other cowboys, or people who weren't white. Thank the gods that society has improved so much since then. Now, High Noon is considered a classic, and I'm a huge, huge lover of Westerns. But this movie didn't live up to the hype for me. Don't get me wrong, the story is excellent, and the ending is highly satisfying, or at least I thought so, but a lot of the acting is extremely soap opera-ish. And I know, that's the way it was back then. I get it, I get it, I get it. But sometimes, with movies from this era, it holds up well, and occasionally it doesn't. Still, I enjoyed it, but it didn't leave me completely satisfied like other Westerns from this era. I give High Noon a Joe rating of 3.5 out of 5. I'm Joe, and I'll still be Joe in the next movie review. See you then. That was the Joe watches a movie and then gives it a rating show. You know what I just thought of? I wonder what kind of store Kane and his wife were going to open. Maybe a vegan store? Did that exist back then in the Old West? Probably not. If they made a sequel today, I bet that's what they would do with it.
Quiet on the set.